And welcome to this video, and on this video I'm going to be talking about essential progressive rock albums. I'm creating these short, concise little 10-minute videos for people who can't take me whittering on for an hour. You know, they just want a little bite-sized chunk of Andy. And I will be recommending some albums. Some of them will be obscure, some of them won't be obscure, but they will all be essential progressive rock albums. And this one's not obscure, it's an absolute legendary album, but I feel I need to talk about it. And it is this album, the Yes album, that came out in 1971. And for me, is the defining album for Yes, but it's also the defining album for me, because back in the early 80s, when I was listening to a lot of new wave of British heavy metal and Zeppelin, I was a real metaler, and that's what my thing was. But I was listening to a lot of weirder metal. I was exploring, and I discovered Hawkwind because I was a big Motorhead fan, and I went out and bought a picture disc of Motorhead, of Silver Machine, and it was all right. I quite liked it. Then this guy comes up to me in school and he says, I've got this album and I don't like it. It's really weird. And I've heard you like weird music, Andy. Do you want to do a swap? And I said, well, I've got a picture disc. You know, thinking I'm not really interested in picture discs, but kids loved picture discs back then. I've got a picture disc of Silver Machine by Hawkwind. Did you want to do a swap? And he went, yeah. So the next day at school, brought it in. And when he swapped it, he gave me this album by a band that I never heard of. I knew nothing about this. They looked a bit strange on the cover. I went home and I put it on. I can remember it to this day because I was just literally astonished by this album. I was looking for something and this album did it. I loved everything about it. I listened to it about 5 times when I got home, and then I can remember taking this album. It's not this one because I lost my copy at some point, and I've had to get this one to replace it. If we had my actual copy in my hand, it would be very wrecked by now. And I can remember reading everything on the back of this album, looking at everything, that floating head, the whole lot. And I sat there and I learned everything on there word for word, so I could say it without reading it. Thus was the beginning of my career as a YouTuber, this idea of reading and trying to remember all this nonsense. What had happened here is Yes had formed in 1968, and they were sort of band, you know, they were pushing the limits, but they really were influenced by the Beatles and the Byrds and sort of certain vocal harmony groups, you know, maybe even the Everly Brothers. They had that type of sound. They were doing a lot of cover versions. The first album's great, but it's not Yes. The second album they did with an orchestra, and they start exploring progressive rock ideas on there, but it doesn't quite work. And I think Peter Banks wasn't the right guy for them. And so Peter Banks left, and they brought in the then current virtuoso guitarist on the London scene who was playing in a band called Tomorrow, which is Steve Howe. And Steve Howe comes in and he revolutionises this band without a doubt. And he brings in a sort of an approach to arrangement that finally makes John Anderson's patchy vocal ideas, these brilliant one-line vocal melodies that are so catchy and beautiful and ethereal, but don't actually go anywhere. And I think on this album, Steve Howe was then able to orchestrate this in certain ways. And I think the whole band played a part in this. But this is a really interesting album because on the following album, Fragile, Rick Wakeman comes in, and Rick Wakeman bringing his sort of classical virtuoso technique and his interest in synthesizers. There we get what we would associate with the sound of Yes. And although this is, you know, full, absolutely full of Yes classic tracks, you know, if you're going to do a best of Yes album, how many of these tracks are you going to go, oh, we'll have a look in a minute? It has a certain sound that is not classic Yes. And I'll tell you what that sound is. It's Tony Kaye, who is a fantastic keyboard player. But at this point, you know, he basically plays on this album, he's playing piano, organ, and it does say Moog, that he's playing a Moog synthesizer. And I think it's on here, but he had a reticence of playing those sounds. The sounds he's dealing with are just really piano and organ, specifically organ. And so I think John Anderson was looking for that orchestral approach, which on the following album, if you think we get Rick Wakeman actually overdubbing in the studio a whole Brahms track using all sorts of manner of different keyboard voicings, that is where the sound comes in. But I think us fans are aware that there is a very particular sound on here. And for many of us, a lot of our favourites Yes tunes are on here. Now, for me, I then had to go and buy other Yes albums, and the following album I bought after this one was Fragile. And then I started doing my research, and I found out there was bands like ELP, and I found out there bands like King Crimson. This is the album that opened the door for me. Now, I haven't gone and pulled it out for a while, and I forgot it was gatefold, and I'm going to show you that, because I used to stare at that as well, especially that little picture down there of Bruford. Right, what's he doing? He's in the studio, he's sat behind his drums, he's reading the newspaper, he's reading the NME or something like that. You know, I was obsessed with Bill Bruford. Bill Bruford was another drummer that changed my approach to drumming. Up until then, I liked the thumpers. I liked Ian Pace, John Bonham, and I liked a good thumper. I wanted a sound of a drum kit to sound like cannons. And then Bruford comes out and he's playing all these weird cymbal sounds. He's got that little high snare and everything's so precise and crisp. And I can remember thinking when I heard Bruford, it wasn't that I just thought, oh, you could have that sound. I thought, oh, you could have any sound. You know, I can clamp cymbals on top of each other, which is what I thought he'd done on Red. You know, so I started clasping cymbals on top of each other, taping stuff to my drums, doing all sorts of things. Bill Bruford opened me up to the idea of experimenting with sounds. Right, let's see how much of a masterpiece we actually have here. So when I talk about a masterpiece with a band, I will go, if I was putting a best of, would that track have to go onto the best of? So let's see how many we get on this album. So it opens up with Yours Is No Disgrace, without a doubt. Absolutely essential, yes. And then we get a very short tune called The Clap. And The Clap is recorded live. It was recorded live at the Lyceum in London. I can read that for you. And it's a virtuoso piece for Steve Howe. When I was a kid, this was essential. This is one of the things that blew us away about this album, because we were listening to people like Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix. So then you put this on, and this guy seems to be able to do anything. But he's not an essential. It's an interesting track. Then we have Starship Trooper, which is perhaps my favourite Yes song of all time, especially Worm, which is insane, and that has to go on. Turn it over, and I've seen All Good People, which is in two halves, Your Move and All Good People. Your Move features recorders on it. They had recorders played by Colin Goldring on this album at the same year that Led Zeppelin stuck recorders on Stairway to Heaven. Essential's got to go on every track. Then we got Adventure. Now, Adventure is an essential track, but it's absolutely fantastic. And for me, what shocked me was at the end of that track, as it fades out, Steve Howe bursts out into a whole bunch of legato guitar playing in very much the same mould as Alan Holdsworth. And my ears pricked up at that point. It was the first time I'd ever heard anybody play the guitar like that. And it was probably the first time anyone had ever recorded a guitar solo like that. Why they faded it out, I do not know, but it's a fantastic track. And then we end with Perpetual Change, again, a Yes standard. So we're talking about 60 to 70% of this is absolutely essential Yes. This is an essential progressive rock album. If you haven't got it, then you're not a progressive rock fan. That's all I can say. So if you enjoyed this video, then stick a like on it. If you want to see some more, you can subscribe. If you want to support me and join the Andy Edwards Club and get a whole bunch of exclusive content, but also meet a whole bunch of like-minded people, then you can do that by clicking the link down below, and you can become a free member as well and get involved. If you don't want to do that, but you want to support me financially, I have a tip jar, and that's down below. Thank you for watching. I hope you appreciate these little short videos, a bit of an experiment for me at the moment. Thank you for watching. Bye. I just witter on right at the end. I should just press the stop button, Andy. Just press it now.